everyone, this is Pico Entertainment and we are back again. I'm going to continue now with our classic anime series on here, and I'm going to concentrate now on one of my most favourite and what I feel is the most underappreciated animes, and that is Battle Angel Alita. This was based on a manga created by Yukio Kishiro. It was originally published from 1990 to 1995, but there have been various adaptations following the publication of that manga. We have a two-part anime adaptation that was released in 1993. That's the one we will be covering. But there were further mangas after that OVA was released, and as we all know, or most of us know, there was a 2019 live-action movie directed by Robert Rodriguez and produced by James Cameron, and that was well received critically and had, I think, very good box office at the time. But we're going to concentrate on a two-part anime adaptation which was released in 1993. The 1993 animation covered primarily the first two volumes of the manga, which were called Rusty Angel and Tear Sign. Now, I do know that when Manga Entertainment UK released this was generally, it put the two volumes together for one singular VHS edition out on here. So normally you would sometimes get the editions released with other animated titles at the time, but later on they separate it for its own individual release on here. You can get various other dubs and which Americanize the voices, and some of the pronunciations of certain characters are changed, but I would highly recommend that you watch the Manga Entertainment dub that you can normally find on YouTube, as you can with various anime versions. So the plot and the setup for this is that we're living in a dystopian future where we have a barren wasteland called the Scrap City that comprises mainly of people that are built up as cyborgs or androids. They've lost their body parts due to the kind of barren, war-torn nature, and they put themselves together with various aesthetics and prosthetics like on here. And we concentrate on a Dr. Edo, and he's going through the scrap yards and the junk yards, if you like, to collect body parts, and he comes across a female cyborg head on here, and he finds that the brain activity is still intact. So he takes this away and he builds it into a new body, a female body, and he names the character called Alita. And over the course of the story, Alita develops her own personality and identity, and she really goes on the voyage of self-discovery, looking for her own purpose, trying to find out questions and answers about her own origin. And we later on find out that Alita has a special, incredible fighting ability and superpowers, and this comes to fruition when she follows Dr. Edo, and she later on finds out that Edo goes around collecting these body parts for scrap metal to sell to a factory, because the setup we have here is that the factory collects these body parts to sell to Zoram. Zoram is a futuristic city that lives directly above the Scrap Iron City, whereas the Scrap Iron City is a barren wasteland, as I mentioned before, very smog and smoke-ridden city. Salem is the opposite. It's a very pristine and futuristic city on here, and everybody wants to kind of branch out and collect enough tokens so they can rise above and get to live in Salem. So Alita, as I mentioned before, she has a very much of a father-daughter relationship with Edo, and we discover that and see that relationship play out over time. Alita wants to find out who she is and express herself a lot more. Edo, being a surrogate father, wants to protect her from all the dangers and exposures that Alita, he feels she may come under. But we later on find out that Alita builds up another relationship with a character called Hugo, and as I mentioned before, Hugo as well wants to collect these body parts so he can sell them to the factory, collect enough tokens and rise above and go access the city of Salem. We also have Sirin, who is another doctor just like Edo, and both her and Edo, they used to work in the city of Salem, and they were resigned to the Scrap Iron City. And like Hugo, she wants to gain access back to Salem on here, but it's very difficult, so she has to use other means necessary. She's willing to go all the way to do this. One of these means involves getting involved with a person called Hector, and he's kind of the contractor or the owner, if you like, of the factory, and he has various operatives and spies all throughout the Scrap Iron City who collect bounty hunters. He uses those as well to sell tokens and the like. He also has connections to what they have, gladiatorial games that have all these bounty hunters and cyborgs going against each other, and people can bet on these to gain money. Again, it's all about collecting tokens to try and get out of the scrap iron city that people coexist on here. So that's the overall main setup of Battle Angel Alita. So what's good about this? And first of all, what's very distinguishable is the animation, the aesthetic, and particularly the artwork and the way that the characters are drawn. They have these very kind of sharp, piercing features about them, very round, pointy noses, big eyes, sharp noses. That was a very distinctive feature of Alita when you look at her herself as a character. She has a very large, piercing eyes about her very round face, very round hair, very distinctive way that the character is drawn. That was very notorious when they released the trailers for the first live action movie, and they concentrated very much on Alita's large big eyes, and it was very disorientating for the viewers on the first viewing. Luckily, later on in the live action, they toned that down a lot more. But as we go on the animation here, yes, it's very distinctive and very well drawn. And I always like that. I always like the fact that anime, they don't have a similar look to each other. Each anime has its own distinctive style and aesthetic, and Alita Angel is very a good example of this. As well as Alita, we see Ido as well, and the way he's drawn, he has his very small rounded eyes and very big nose and long chin as well. Sirin as well has a very sharp edged features about her on it. So I love that distinctiveness about the way that the characters are drawn and the aesthetic. And it's very immersive as well. The way it builds is very dark, very bleak dystopian tone. We see the long cylinders of Zarim as they go through and connect themselves to the scrap iron city. And we learn that Zarim also has these kind of long cylinders to kind of fend off anybody that tries to climb their way and reach up to Zalim by trying to traverse up to these cylinders on here. And we have various scenes where we see the kind of droning and very scrap tones, and that's all good. It's all very well to build that very bleak world that people live on here, and that's a very good character trait, that people are constantly struggling to try and better themselves and get themselves out of the scrap iron city. As well as the animation, there are very stunning fight sequences and battle sequences. There are two in particular really outstanding on here. One, I think, at the end of the first kind of chapter, and one in the middle of the second chapter. And we see on here, they really display Alita is very highly active and super powered beyond her. The way that she transmits her powers and exhibits her abilities, we see that she's able to kind of control and manipulate electricity and plasma and energy waves, and these are stunning sequences for us. We see she makes these long leaps into the sky, she's pirouetting, she's somersaulting, she's able to run at fast speeds and kind of exhibit traits of super strength and super abilities. It's all fantastic to watch. Really kind of cinematic visuals on here. We see these large explosions, and as I said before, projectiles, and Alita is a fascinating character to watch as she's learning to kind of discover her own fighting skills as well on it. So really great action like on it. But what really makes Alita stand out is the characterization, and we have great emotional beats and emotional centers on here. Alita herself, as I mentioned before, as she's trying to rediscover herself and define her own purpose, she's a very sympathetic and empathetic character on here. They make sure that we really feel the weight of what she's trying to do on here. There's a really good connection that she builds with Ido. I mentioned before that kind of surrogate father dynamic, and he wants to be very protective of her, but as the story develops, he understands Alita's yearning to be more individual and express herself, and he supports her later on, and that's all. I think that's always great, and that lends you a lot more to Ido as a character. The relationship as well between Alita and Hugo is really what makes this a really strong story on here. The anime here spends a good amount of time with these two characters, whether they're sitting on rooftops or certain rooms, and it gives them a good time to converse and understand one another. Alita really identifies and understands Hugo's quest to branch into Zalim. We get a good amount of backstory and the tragedy that Hugo has undertaken on here, and again that lends us a lot more into his own character and makes us relate to him more and understand. And I love the bond that is built between these two. We have these lovely musical tones that we see as the characters converse between one another. And yeah, it is a eventual love story, but I don't think it's built on a kind of sexual attraction. I think it's a much more of a personality and identity, right? And that's really a strong theme throughout this anime. It's identity and discovering who you are, what your goal is, and what your purpose is. And I think that very much is what draws Alita to Hugo, the fact that he wants to better himself and he wants to look for a better world and a better tomorrow. And it's very poignant, very kind of pathos moments here, very sympathetic, very beautiful moments, I think, between these two characters. And that's great on here. Shirin as well is a very distinctive character. She's, at the first, you think she's kind of the villain of the piece, but overall we understand again her own desires and her own ambitions to kind of come back to Zolom. You know, she maybe goes about it a bit more underhanded, a bit more ruthless ways, but overall we get to understand again why she wants to come out of the Scrap Iron City. Hector as well, he is the antagonist. He's very slimy, he's very conniving. You know, he's got far reaches and connections throughout on it. So he's a very good villain on here, and he has connections between all the various characters on here. So great characterization, great emotional beats, and great heart as well. And that's what I love about this. There's a great depth and heart, and you really understand these characters. It's not the typical anime where there's wall-to-wall action, despite the fact I did mention that you have stunning action sequences. That's not really the root cause of Battle Angel Alita. It is more about self-discovery, self-identity, and building a bridge of discovery and a connection between certain characters as you understand what they want to do and their own purposes alike on it. So it's all fantastic. Great musical score, as I mentioned before. I love how the musical score accompanies the fight sequences that we have, and we see Alita in these great fights and lots of energetic abilities, and there's a constant beating drum as she exhibits her powers on a really kind of vivid sound as she exhibits all her powers. It's all fantastic to watch on here. So if I had to give an overall score for Battle Angel Alita, I would give it a 9.5 out of 10. I really think it's an outstanding, very bleak, very dark, and there are moments of violence on here as well, yes, as you expect from anime, but there's also a very poetic beauty to it, a very kind of emotional kind of connection and relation to it that I think you can understand a lot more. It moves at a very well paced, very leisurely pace on it, builds its story and builds its character very well, and I really think it really is truly amongst one of the best animes out there, and I really recommend that you would watch this. So as I mentioned before, there was a continuation. We had further mangas after the 1990 version, and they delved a lot more into Alita's history as a hunter warrior within Mars, and focus a lot more on the fighting skill, which I think is known as Panther Kurtz on here. As I mentioned before, the 2019 live action movie concentrated a lot more on the first 4 volumes of the manga, where we see later on branch out of the Scrap Iron City. She makes her way to Zolom. She takes part in the motorball sequences. That's what you saw in the movie a lot, and then later on it delves a lot more in kind of the future antagonists such as Destiny Nova, and that branches a lot more into the manga. And if you read the manga and you go furthermore deeper into the volumes, you see a lot more that Destiny Nova takes much more of a central role as the main antagonist, and we have a lot more introduction, if you like, into Alita and various dreams and nightmares that she has as she further discovers where she is and where she comes from. So I would highly recommend as well reading the manga. So those are my overall thoughts on Battle Angel Alita. It is a shame that we didn't get a further continuation in this anime here. I've mentioned many times that we've seen the likes of Devilman and Appleseed and Ghost in the Shell get further continuations on Netflix. So I would hope one day that we get the same treatment for Alita. I was also hoping that the live action movie would be very much a successful, and that would branch to further continuations of this anime. I was also hoping that we would get a HD release of this 1993 version, but so far nothing has materialized. But who knows, if we can get a sequel to live action movie and it can prove to be very popular and successful, maybe then that will have studios have more confidence in the property, and they will then remaster this version, because I think it's deserving of one alike on here. I know the live action movie was very much well received amongst fans on here, and if you go online, a lot of people are very supportive that we do get a live action sequel. So hopefully we do get that in the future. It would be good to see Robert Rodriguez to return because he did do a very good job. I initially wanted James Cameron to do it, but he's caught up in all these multiple Avatar sequels, so I don't think he'll be directing the sequel. But anyway, going on the anime, I just hope that we can see a further continuation or reimagination in the future. But I would like it to stick to the same tone and the same direction that this 1993 version had on it, because as I said before, it really is one of the best story driven animes out there, and I highly recommend that you watch it. So those are my thoughts on Battle Angel Alita. Let me know what you think in the comments below. If you indeed watch it and you go on to watch the live action movie, how do you think it compared? Did you think there were some areas that the live action movie did better than the anime, or did you feel the anime improved on areas that the live action movie didn't? I personally thought that anime was superior because it stayed focused primarily on the first two volumes, and I think one flaw that the live action movie did was that it tried to condense too many volumes into a 2 hour movie, and the narrative kind of got stretched and kind of got disorientated at times. But overall, it was a solid job. But for me, the anime is superior. So those are my thoughts on Battle Angel Alita. Let me know what you think in the comments below. I will provide more reviews of this classic anime series. So that's it for now. Take care of yourselves, stay at safe distances, and I will see you very, very soon.